Hello, and welcome to POMA Does, a podcast produced by the Pennsylvania Osteopathic Medical Association. We provide a voice for osteopathic medicine and share insights on issues important to osteopathic physicians, residents, and students, as well as those who embrace the osteopathic philosophy. POMA's mission is to promote the distinctive philosophy and practice of osteopathic medicine for our patients, our members, and the communities we serve. Thanks for tuning in.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the POMA Does podcast. You are currently listening to our 73rd episode, been over 3 years in the making now, so thank you so much for joining us. My name is Angela Zawesta. I am currently the Vice President for POMA, and with me, I also have Dr. George Walters, who is our President-elect, and Dr. John Collada, who is our immediate past President and will be finishing up his 4 years as a POMA officer. So thanks, gentlemen, for joining me today. What we're going to talk about today are volunteers within POMA and how POMA is based on volunteers. And I know it can sound a little bit scary at first. Everyone is busy. Everyone has a lot of time dedicated to other things, work, family, etc. And the idea of volunteering can be a little bit daunting at first. I know it was for me, even just a short time ago. So we want to talk to you about some ways that you can get involved with POMA, even for just a small fraction of your time. Dr. Walters, can you start talking about the committee structure of POMA and how that leads to people being involved with POMA?
Sure. As probably everyone already knows, POMA has existed for 125 years, primarily to promote osteopathy, but also to promote Pennsylvania osteopathic physicians. The committee system is a way for the organization to address challenges that occur over the course of time. Our committee system evolved to evaluate member concerns, proposals, problems that came up. The committee covers pretty much all areas of interest that you can think of: finance, state government, clinical assembly, public policy, physician wellness, membership, digital outreach, one of our favorites, mentorship, and really many other areas, along with a number of task forces and work groups that address specific concerns over a specific period of time. The meetings are interactive, discussions encouraged, and it's a great way to share with your fellow Pennsylvania osteopaths where you think the organization should be going or what problems are occurring within the state. As a volunteer, the key to the committee system are volunteers who offer their experience, their education, and just their common sense to give different ideas, different outlooks. The meetings are almost all virtual now. They last for less than an hour. Committees meet from monthly to quarterly. They're very low-key. They're very discussion-oriented. And it gives you an opportunity not only to make a difference, but help continue to move forward. We haven't gotten to where we are, which I think, frankly, is amazing, without the volunteers and the committees doing a lot of the grunt work, a lot of the legwork.
John, as the champion for the community pillar, you're actually in charge of, I believe, 7 different committees, perhaps more, but certainly the bulk of the committees within the POMA structure. Can you tell me some things that you've learned, being in charge of the committees and seeing different volunteers over the last 4 years?
Thanks, Angie, and thanks, George. I think one thing that's impressed me incredibly over the last 4 years is how the various perspectives of our members as they serve on committees really has helped POMA to grow. Specifically, as you know, really our work is divided into 4 pillars: advocacy, communications, education, and community, which really encompasses all the work that POMA does. The community pillar really tries to bring physicians throughout Pennsylvania together. We have a mentorship committee. We have a membership committee. We have committee on engaging the younger doctors, both students and residents. And certainly all of that has added to the lifeblood of POMA. The one thing I can say is, for my presidential year last year, the success of what we did in that year was largely driven not just by leadership and by the strategic plan, but by the energy and engagement of the people who volunteered. For example, and this is outside of my pillar, but this was in the communications pillar, our POMA podcast series really was pushed by a couple of the medical students who'd done podcasts in different venues and different platforms. And they really pushed us, these young soon-to-be physicians, really pushed us older doctors into getting off the mark and getting moving. And now we're up to 75 or so episodes, largely because of the work of those student volunteers. One of my pet projects last year was the Committee on Veteran and Military Engagement. We had several members, both active members in practice, some retirees, some resident members, and some student members who have military experience, who really have found ways to engage and to recognize our veterans and our military folks. We've seen the advocacy, the folks in the advocacy side really push and stay engaged and keep their pulse on what's going on in Harrisburg that affects our patients and our practices. So all of that has really been in large part due to the engagement and the energy that the volunteers bring. The most successful committees and the ones that produce the best outcomes are the ones where people are interested and engaged. And I would encourage anybody, when the call for volunteers comes out in a month or so, to please consider volunteering.
Absolutely. And if you're anything like me, years ago, I personally could not see myself really being involved with POMA all that much. I was a younger physician. I had several young children at the time. All of my time was being stretched into different places. And, even the thought of giving 1 extra hour a month was a little bit daunting. And so we can certainly understand that. But even if you have interest in volunteering for POMA, you don't necessarily need to be a part of a committee. You could volunteer your time and thoughts in other ways as well. And you don't really have to know anything how to put your ideas together. We just need the enthusiasm and the energy and the ideas that are coming from all across the state. My practice experience and my experience as a pediatric hospitalist in a rural hospital in central Pennsylvania is very different than John's experience as a family medicine physician in the snowbound Erie, Pennsylvania, which is different than George's experience as a retired ER physician from Philadelphia. And we have so many other areas of the state and so many other people who can provide a wealth of information to us and help us move forward. John, it's funny that you mentioned the podcast and how they got started by the students. And I know the person who was running the committee at the time, and he's like, I have no idea what's going on, but these students really have a great idea and are really helping us push things forward. And here we are 3 years later. I'm currently champion of the communications pillar. And we just recently released our first issue of the digital version of the Journal of the POMA, and sort of a similar situation, publishing a digital journal. From my personal experience, I have no idea what's going on there, but there was a lot of energy in that committee and a lot of talent in that committee, just bring in a little bit to the table 1 hour a month.
I neglected to mention the influence pillar, which is primarily the government affairs committee. It provided for me an insight into how POMA works with our lobbyists and the politicians in Harrisburg, but more importantly, just watching the legislative process, the deliberateness, I hate to say it, the abilities of the politicians, I thought was pretty impressive. It gave me a view of Harrisburg that, quite honestly, I didn't share for forever. And I can't say enough about both the POMA staff that covers it and the lobbying group that we have. It's amazing to hear the reports pretty much before anybody else in the state gets them.
One thing that struck me, just sitting back and observing, and particularly this year when I'm almost yesterday's news as media past president, one thing that strikes me is how a person just sort of on a whim maybe decides to join a committee, and the 1 or 2 things that he or she says makes the rest of the committee think differently, opens up our eyes, opens up our minds, and really helps to drive some of what we're doing forward. And in that regard, if you've never served on a committee and if you've never really thought about being part of what we're doing as your organization, sign up. When the call for volunteers comes out, you'll be able to express what sort of interest you have. And Dr. Walters has that task of deciding who's going to serve. In my eyes, even though big committees sometimes get unwieldy, the more people who want to volunteer, I think the better for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the ideas that we're putting together from the Mentor Committee, which I'm also chair of, came from a brand new member, new to the committee structure of POMA. And so hopefully we'll be releasing that event later this spring. But it just takes, a little bit of time, a little bit of thought, and we can certainly do a lot of things with just those little ideas. So, not to state perhaps the obvious, but Dr. Collada and Dr. Walters have a little bit more experience than I do in terms of POMA volunteering and that sort of thing. What are some personal gains that you have experienced from volunteering for POMA over the years?
I'll defer to my elder colleague.
The one thing that I miss as we get busier as doctors and as the electronic medical record sometimes strangles us is the ability to get together with other physicians. I believe more and more that the only people who are looking out for osteopathic physicians are other osteopathic physicians. There was a time when you could go down to the doctor's dining room and spill your guts to your colleague, and you would develop this wonderful professional and personal relationship with your fellow osteopathic physician, and you really became friends. And I think the net result of that is better patient care because you got to know how the person thought. And certainly the collegiality that POMA brings is something that you're not going to find in other places. You don't have 5 minutes to go to a doctor's dining room anymore, very rarely. But you have a half an hour on a Tuesday night where you may get together with a colleague from across the state, and pretty soon you're fast friends. From a personal standpoint, sometimes when things get tough in your personal life, to know that there's somebody else going through the same tribulations as you really means a lot. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think our organization brings so much to the table in terms of our patients and our state that it's just very gratifying to see like-minded individuals, doctors who really care about the profession and about our patients get together for a common goal. It really is a wonderful thing to see when you have a proposal, work product, somebody has an idea and it comes to fruition and now there's something tangible, whether that be a wonderful clinical conference, a way to recognize a veteran, a way to, bring white coats and mentorship and ice cream to the medical schools. All of that's really great to see. So those personally are things that I've gotten and I still get out of being part of POMA.
I also recall when I was considerably younger going to committee meetings and being very honored to be considered as just another one of the physicians with guys who had been in practice for 30 years. Now that's kind of flip-flop, again, watching the med students, the residents, the younger doctors coming out and listening to their opinions, and especially when they correct my opinions, mostly because I was wrong to begin with. It's not only heartwarming, but it's really good for the soul. I won't say the committee will change your life, but it certainly is a positive. And honestly, to me, you feel better after the committee meetings are over, regardless of the disagreements. We're all friends. We're all physicians. We're all colleagues. And that's the collegiality is something you can't get elsewhere.
I will say myself too, I'm sort of a mid-career state and interacting with POMA student volunteers and resident volunteers kind of reinvigorates, you and excites you and reminds you why you became a physician in the first place and why you're doing all of this in the first place. John alluded to, it can be pretty easy to, get stuck in the quagmire of medicine and healthcare sometimes. And just to get together, even with, with the younger students and the residents and even with the other physicians that are going through the same thing as you, it really is refreshing to know that you're not the only one in that situation and sort of gives you a boost, so to speak, into fighting the fight. Dr. Walters or Dr. Collada, do you have anything that you wanted to add to our call for volunteers other than sign up when the call for volunteers comes out?
Just that when you receive a call for a volunteer, give it consideration, give it thought. I think it would be a positive for both POMA and for the members, and we really could use your support. We'll do the best we can to fit you into your interests. And again, our thanks for any of your support.
Absolutely.
I agree. If I could just add, if you're on a committee this year and you still want to serve, please fill out that form. We need to know that you're still interested. Building on our success with our current volunteers and then anybody new is just a wonderful thing. So please send the form back and just thank you for being a member. Thank you for being part of POMA. And thanks in advance on behalf of Dr. Walters for volunteering. It really is a great experience and it's a tremendous way to give back to the profession.
So I will echo these fine gentlemen's thoughts. Thank you, first of all, for listening to the podcast, one of our committee creations. And thank you for considering being a volunteer. And I will reiterate what John said. If you already are volunteering for POMA, please still fill out the call for volunteers. With that, thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of POMA Does. Be sure to subscribe to POMA Does wherever you listen to your podcasts and tell your friends and colleagues to tune in. Learn more about osteopathic medicine and POMA on our webpage, www.poma.org, and join the conversation on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Or email us at poma@poma.org. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next time for another edition of POMA Does.